Archbishop Mpako, thank you so much for talking to us today, and happy anniversary.
Thank you very much, and you're most welcome.
So Archbishop Mpako, most recently the SACBC established the Commission for the Implementation of Synodality in the region, that is the 3 member countries, South Africa, Botswana, Eswatini. Talk to us about this establishment. How far are you as a commission?
Yes, I think this was a very important move by the Bishops' Conference to establish this Commission for Synodality, something that was recommended in the final document, that every Episcopal conference is encouraged, to make available resources and structures that can, carry out this implementation of the Synod outcomes. So that was a very good thing. And also the good thing to report is that that commission is up and running, functioning well, and it has been registered with the Secretariat at the Vatican, and we've had a few meetings, and we are making progress in terms of assisting synodal teams in dioceses to know, how to carry out their work. But at the end of the day, as it is emphasized, it is the responsibility of the local bishop to actually drive the implementation of the synod using the synodal team in his diocese.
So speaking about the role of the bishop, that it is actually the bishop's duty to ensure that synodality is put into place in their local dioceses, I'm thinking of the latest document from the Synod on Synodality, that is Pathways. Now, Pathways clearly highlights the main topics that emerged from the final document of the Synod in October 2024. However, from October 2024 to now, there are still many gaps. And when I talk about gaps, I'm talking about many dioceses and in particular clergy that are not aware about synodality. Either they're aware and ignoring it, but we hardly hear much about synodality on the ground.
Yes, just to talk about this document, Pathways for the Implementation Phase, we have really welcomed that document, with gratitude and appreciation, because it is going to go a long way in assisting the Commission and also the synodal teams in dioceses to know exactly how to go about implementing the Synod. So that's a very important development. You are right, there's still a lot of work to be done to bring people on board, with the Synod on Synodality, especially our priests. In many of our dioceses, I don't think enough has been done yet to conscientize priests about, the importance of engaging with this process. And also understanding that this is the new pastoral plan of the Universal Church. It's not an optional extra that we can take it or leave it. This is what the Church is about at this time. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. In some of the dioceses, we've made some strides. I mean, like in Pretoria here, our priests have been workshopped, talked to, a couple of times. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So hopefully those synodal teams, and especially if the bishop is involved with them and is motivating, all in the diocese to take, part in this, hopefully maybe by the time we reach, 2028, more and more of our dioceses will have come on board.
And speaking of synodal teams, I know that the document asks that we revive the initial synodal teams, but then again, there are cases where probably certain dioceses never really got on board with the initial phase of the synodal process back in 2021. And then there are cases where maybe the members of those synodal teams are no longer there or no longer interested. What would be your advice to such case scenarios?
Well, in some of the cases that you mentioned, where nothing at all existed, as the document says, people must start from the scratch and put together a synodal team. in those cases where there were some synodal teams of one kind or another, then to resuscitate them, revive them, like we've done in Pretoria here. We had a synodal team, which was not called that before, but it was doing, overseeing our own diocesan synod. Now that team has now morphed into being a synodal team for the Archdiocese. Most of the members were there before, continue to be there, but we have added in new other members. So that's one way of going about it. But at the end of the day, that you have a synodal team. It does help if it includes people who have already been part of the consultation phase of the synod. But if that was not the case, then this is the time now for all of us to begin by putting together those synodal teams.
And who would be the members of these synodal teams?
That's very important to clarify also to the bishops, that these teams must really be fully representative of all the different formations, charisms, in the diocese, and what is mentioned in the document itself, laymen, and I added youth, consecrated persons, and even maybe people in lay associations, so that everyone participates, especially in the discernment process. So it must be diversified enough, and also it must be big enough for there to be, fruitful exchange of views. But the most important thing is all the different aspects, must be represented.
Well, thank you so much for that. Now, looking at the recently concluded plenary assembly of SACM, one of the pillars, or rather one of the points that they identified going forward for the next 20 to 25 years is synodality, living synodality as a church, and it's good to know that SACBC is also following in those footsteps. What would you say are the main challenges of implementation of synodality? We've already spoken about priests, getting priests on board. We've already spoken about the bishop being involved. But what would you say are other challenges that the church in Africa, in this case Southern Africa, in South Africa, Botswana, Eswatini, would experience?
Well, I suppose in terms of the synodal teams, one possible challenge is that in some of the dioceses you may not have enough people who are willing, to participate in a meaningful way, in this process. That's number one. Sourcing the right people who can actually drive and motivate this process. That's going to be one challenge. But again, the priests, are going to need really to be enthused about this. Because not only, have they not been brought on board, but some of them are consciously resisting it. Because part of it is that synodality is in a way, dealing away with clericalism, where the priest had the power to decide alone, and then some of the people feel like it's affecting them negatively in that way. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done. But if, for me, the priests aren't involved, then this is not going to work. For me, that would be the main focus. But at the same time, on the positive side, you see, we have fertile ground in Africa and here for synodality. Some of the structures, the bodies that are needed to drive synodality are already there, small Christian communities. We have pastoral councils, at the parish level, diocesan level. We have our lay associations, the sodalities. So it's a question of infusing all those existing structures now with this spirit of synodality. So for us, it's not like we are starting from the scratch. We have, already, things that we can work on and just, infuse this spirit into them. So it's not all doom and gloom, but at the same time, there's a long way to go in convincing people that this is who we are called to be as church at this time.
And I suppose language also matters.
Language does matter, but for the synodal teams, I mean, it would be ideal that there are people who can, be comfortable with the English language. And then when you have people who are comfortable with the English language and then who can translate it to their vernacular languages when they run workshops. But ideally, would like to have some of the documents, translated into the different languages here. But I don't consider that, a big obstacle, because right now many of our people, are conversant with English. I go to townships confirming, sometimes I'm asked to use English, to confirm them. So I don't think that would be a big challenge.
And then, of course, synodality, when we talk about the synod on synodality, some people, if not most people, say this is something created by Pope Francis. It's just something that he dreamt of, and he thought, let's leave out synodality, let's be a synodal church. But then if you look down the line, if you look at the church's history and you look at the documents that came out of the Second Vatican Council, you realize that there are many similarities, and as a matter of fact, some conferences never even looked at those documents. What would you say to those people that have this mentality that synodality is something totally new, something that is here to disrupt the church?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a very, unfortunate statement for people to make. It shows again that people, as you say, have not really familiarized themselves, especially with the documents of the Second Vatican Council. Because as Pope Francis used to say, the synod process is simply, implementing what the Second Vatican Council, said about who we are called to be as church, Lumen Gentium. That, as church, we are not a hierarchical institution, first and foremost, but we are the people of God who, by virtue of our baptism, have equal dignity and share equally, in the responsibility for the life and mission of the church. That's Vatican II. We were taught that at the seminar. But what happened was, while these documents and these new models of church were put forward, they were never really translated into the ordinary life of the church. There were things that were up there. And what Pope Francis was doing was to make this now, shape the way we live our daily life as church. Because even though Vatican II did take place, practically we continue to live as if, we're in Vatican I. We knew all these things, but in many cases they were not implemented. When we were there for the Synodal Assembly, I was surprised to hear that in some countries there were no pastoral councils, which means some of the things that we even take them for granted here, and we've been doing them for years. There are parts of the world where Vatican II never even began. So people have to be taught about that, brought back again to what Vatican II did. Because what Vatican II did was to bring about a paradigm shift in how we understand ourselves as church. But then it took a long time for that shift to begin to influence, the practical life of the church, which is what the Synod is doing now.
And lastly, for some exciting news, it's good to know that the SACBC will be sending representatives for the Jubilee for Synodal teams. Talk to us about this decision.
Oh yeah, that's a very important, welcome development. We've indeed at the last moment, but then we were happy that the secretariat of our conference agreed to sponsor 2 of the people to go there. And then the third person also, offered and volunteered to go and pay for their travel. So it's very exciting to know that we are going to be represented there. But even more so that these 3 people going there are going to have their first experience of being part of the synodal process. So hopefully when they come back, they'll come back even more enthused about it.
Well, Archbishop Mpako, thank you so much for talking to us about synodality, about the implementation phase, which we are living now, pathways, with the document pathways as well. And it's this implementation phase between now and 2028. So thank you so much for talking to us. Any last remarks as you conclude the plenary session here at Kanya House?
Well, I think we need to enthuse our bishops as well. I'm hoping that there will be a slot where Bishop Tulan and I can talk again to our fellow bishops so that they also take this seriously and, sort of move the process in their own dioceses.